Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to look at, we're going to talk about playing in the Blitz qualifier. So I played in the British Blitz Championships qualifier in north east of England. Unfortunately, I did not qualify. There were 2 spots available. I finished level on points with Gedminus Zarakowskis, originally from Lithuania, now living in England, and Grandmaster Keith Arkle. I believe Zarakowskis is international master. Played him on several occasions. Now, what I kind of felt a little bit of regret after the tournament was not so much the fact that I didn't qualify as the fact that probably I should have made the effort to go across and play the Northwest qualifier, because I felt that I would have qualified if I played that. I think you just got to make sure you qualify. Now, originally, Keith Arkle wasn't going to play. He told me a few days beforehand he was turning up. And that kind of made the qualification. We'll look at the final standings later. It kind of made the qualification not so certain for me. So then you got 3 good players there rather than 2. So it kind of, yeah, I should have really qualified anyway. But we'll see in these games that I made a couple of mistakes in my approach. I don't want to make excuses. I played good players, but I think the start of the tournament was bad for me because partly I was nervous, and partly I didn't eat properly before the games. So I got the 9 o'clock bus. So the first bus I could get was like the 9:15 bus into Gosforth. Obviously, I could have stayed over the night, right, closer. Then I would have had more time to get breakfast. Got the 9:15 bus. Probably should have had breakfast at home, of course, but I don't generally eat at home. I normally go out and get a cafe or something. Got in at 10:45, and I grabbed a sandwich, but it wasn't enough. You know, I kind of felt I was like undernourished for the first few games. And as soon as I went for some lunch, this was like middle of the tournament, I then got on a bit of a tear. I started winning every game. Got a bit of energy inside me. So these kind of things, you know, it's small margins often, as we see, you know, I missed out on tiebreak. The small margins can make a big difference. In this particular case, I felt I was a little bit nervous. It was a little bit how I started when I qualified for the final last year, which took place near Warwick. I think it was something like Leamington Spa or something like this. Or maybe it's not Leamington Spa. No, it's not Leamington Spa. Maybe it's something like Tunbridge. I can't remember. Somebody will tell me like where the final actually takes place. I know it's somewhere like Royal Tunbridge Wells or something like this, or Royal Leamington Spa. But it's near there. It's like a hotel near there, right? It's near Warwick as well, because I stayed in Warwick, and it probably cost me about £300. So that was the upside. The fact that I wouldn't have to make this lengthy journey. I'm not sure where the final is this year. I think it might be in the same place. So I won't have to make a lengthy journey to go down, spend, you know, 150 quid on a train, and you get 2 nights accommodation. Is probably going to be another 100 quid. All the money you spend on food while you're there will cost me a small fortune. So I've got the relief. I don't have to worry about that, right? Which is great. I mean, the downside is I don't get the chance to be British Blitz champion or whatever. Who cares? Anyway, I'm going to show you the game. So I played Nick Zgalos in round 2. Somebody I had a good score against. He told me later that I had 13-0 against him. So Nick is from Cyprus originally. He now lives in Glasgow. He does a bit of chess coaching, but he also works for a bank, I think. Takes calls from customers. But he's actually, I think, a player who's underrated. You know, he should be higher than 1900 FIDE Blitz, to be honest. Probably, I mean, in this game, certainly played a lot better than 1900. Towards the end of the tournament, he started to collapse, but I think it didn't really reflect how well he played against me, for example. So we'll have a quick look at what happened in that game. And so far, this is all some sort of theory. Now, I have played this line before. Nick said he prepared for this tournament. He prepared for certain opponents, like myself. Prepared for Anarai, was also there, and one of the low-rated players. So it was an impressive level of preparation. I didn't bother to prepare. Partly because I'm lazy, and partly because I thought, well, it's Blitz. I can't be bothered to prepare. I feel like I could beat these people anyway. Every other year I've qualified with ease. First year I played, I got 15 out of 15. Okay, probably slightly weaker field than it was this year, but I still, the people like Charlie Sawyer possibly were playing. I think Lauren Da Costa was playing. David Eggleston. I'm not sure if Charlie Sawyer was playing that year or not. I might be historically incorrect, but Roger Kofut was playing. There were a number of good players. Last year, Charlie Story did play. I think I remember playing Charlie Story. Tim Wall, I remember playing. Sarakowskis was there, beat him. I got 14. I qualified comfortably by about 2.5 points, right? 2 points, 2.5 points. Very comfortable qualification. So both years I qualified comfortably. I didn't really feel like I needed to prepare. I felt like I'm just going to breeze through anyway. Who cares, you know? So I went here. This is still following some kind of theory. Bishop b5 is an old move that used to be played by Kasparov, still played now. So the main line, I believe, in this variation goes from like knight d7, castles, c5. And I've had this online many times. And this is actually quite reasonable for black. I think it goes something like queen e2, queen c7. Maybe bishop b2 can be played. There's this old Kasparov games as well, where he often ended up playing like some kind of pawn sack with d5, or it's like Kasparov port-ish back in the day. But anyway, black goes like rook d8, rook c8. That's kind of what I expect him to do, right? But instead he went to c5 immediately, which is not bad. And then went bishop a6. Yeah, it's kind of already, I was slightly taken by surprise. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I wish I just played like a normal move here. I was too nervous and thinking too long. You know, when you like, I kind of felt the pressure. I should have just gone bishop f4. You know, what's going to happen is probably going to trade off, maybe take it. Or we could go knight c6 immediately and then probably play a move like knight c6. Some kind of normal move like that. Maybe knight d7 is also possible. And the game would have continued. But instead, I'd probably around about here, I was trying too hard to kind of prove something. I took, which is, again, which is fine. But I think after knight takes, I should have either gone bishop e3 or bishop f4. Because I went here. Which is not a terrible move, but it's very forcing. And now the game becomes quite sharp. And now again, you know, I was like forced to think a lot around about this point in the game, where you don't really want to do in a blitz game. You're only getting 3 minutes plus increment. I started to be down on the clock. Normally I'm up on the clock in all these kind of blitz games, right? I'm the one forcing the running. He took on d5. Yeah, and I was expecting me like bishop f6. We went knight c7, which actually was quite a good move. And the problem is he's now threatening to take his pawn, right? So I played c4. And that immediately undermines me with b5 again. Yeah, good move. Because now his pawn on d5 is weak. Now in the game I calculate this move, bishop f4. The problem was it was running into bishop d6. Otherwise I would have gone bishop f4. Because he can't take, I don't think, because of d6. He's strong. And if he goes knight e6, I just take on e7, hitting the queen and the rook. So he doesn't have time to take on f4. If he goes bishop f6, I take on c7, I'm winning. But the problem is he just goes, after bishop f4, he just plays a move bishop to d6, which is kind of an annoying move. And so I was spending time calculating this variation. You know, obviously, again, you know, at blitz, you don't really want to be spending much time. You start falling behind the clock, puts you under pressure. We see that later in the game, this becomes significant because I blundered. Yeah, I mean, I guess his position's still fairly close to equal. I could take on b5, but I'm certainly not better. He could probably then either take on d5 or take on b5. And the other problem is if you play me like knight e5, threatening knight c6, he can actually go queen f6 here, I think. And he's hitting the bishop and the knight. So how do you actually, you can't avoid losing material here. If you play this, this is just going to end up in a lost position for white. Black's already material up and d5 is weak. So you can't play this variation at all. Yeah, so I was spending all this time, so eventually I took here, he took on d5, probably could have also taken a pawn on b5, that was also reasonable, but he took the pawn on d5, not a bad move. I probably should have forced the issue and just played a move like bishop f4, forced the queens off. No, I can't play bishop f4 because b5 is hanging, that's right. B5 is hanging. So I played a4, which is again probably not a terrible move. I could have just taken, yeah, maybe I should just force queens off immediately. But this pawn on b5 is a little bit weak. He's quite active in the centre, threatening stuff like bishop f6. I went a4, which I don't think could be a bad move. He went rook d8. Yeah, maybe now I should have actually, given the clock situation, I should have kept it messy and actually gone queen e2. Because sometimes when you're short of time, the temptation is to get the queens off, which is reasonable, you know. But I think, like, given I'm a high rated player, I think a move like queen e2 here might have been, you know, sensible. Obviously, he's probably going to play something like knight e6, right? And he's going to have a good game. You know, I can't really argue white is much better here, but I don't know, maybe bishop b2. Still very messy. Bishop probably come back to f8 here. Rook's going to go to d1. There was some variations I can think about. Knight e5, coming into c6. Yeah, so something like this. Probably not here now because of knight f4, I guess. Then queen g4. So maybe some variation like this is going to happen. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly solid here. I shouldn't really be. I mean, he could also come across on the queen side, kind of like the game, and kind of trying to press me on the queen side, which is kind of this kind of move can be very annoying for white. Because here he's got knight f4, and like, how do I keep on the bishop? You know, in a blitz game, you start panicking around here. You think, well, actually, yeah, you got to keep on the rook as well. So you can't go queen e4 because he's going to take on d1. You can, however, play this move. Bear in mind, all these games I've had to recount from memory. None of these games were saved. They weren't live on live boards, so you have to remember all the games. It's quite tricky. I did my best. Here I'm thinking there's something wrong here. No, hang on. It doesn't quite work. Yeah, no, take. You can take with a rook, right? And somehow I'm just about okay, but it looks shaky, but I'm just about okay. It's actually queen a4. No, queen a4 is going to... Yeah, queen a4 actually is playable because you can't take the rook because... Here. Crazy variation. So maybe I'm just losing the pawn. There's moves like rook d7 here. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that I should have just kept the game sharp, but obviously you don't have time to think. A lot of time you're just reacting. So I played, believe I went here. What did I play here? I went bishop b3 fairly quickly, you know, to attack this weakness, potential weakness. He went bishop f6. Again, like a move that I kind of found annoying, yeah. And probably I should just trade here and, you know, bring the rook somewhere. As quickly as bring the rook to d1 or something. But the problem actually here, like he takes it in the knight, where do I put the rook? Because if I put the rook here, maybe this is a problem. And now he's threatening knight e2. And yeah, so it's natural to move this rook. So I went rook b1, but I think actually rook c1 would have been better. Rook c1 probably would have been. I've not checked any of these games with an engine either, so I have no idea what. You might find improvements at home over my terrible shoddy analysis. But yeah, rook c1 was probably quite a good move, attacking this pawn. But again, I don't think black is really in any great danger here. I mean, he could play with like knight e6. Or he could play like he played in the game with queen a2. But that would run into queen c2. Now this pawn does become weak. So I think here I made a mistake as well. It's a little bit rusty. And I went rook b1. It's like a bit of a shaky move, and he went queen a2 very quickly, and I was like, oh my god, you know, that's an annoying move. And again, you know, I didn't have time to calculate moves like knight d2, which may have been playable, but then knight d5 looking a little bit awkward for white. Don't really like knight d2, knight d5 here. This looks shaky for white. What are you actually doing here? He's just going to take on e3 and try and take on d2. There's also knight c3 as a threat. So queen f3, knight e3, fe3, queen d2. Rather than rook d2, queen a8. So I decided after here, I decided to exchange queens, and now he went very quickly. He played this move, which again was the best move probably. He doesn't want to go passive with knight e6. Then I can blockade with knight d2. Yeah, annoying move. He's playing good moves. I went here. He went here. I went here and he went here. And I think if I'd been thinking, like, if I'd had more time and I'd been thinking more sensibly, I probably would have played better moves around about this point. Maybe some move like rook fc1 is playable. Because, you know, if he trades and goes rook c8, let's say I go rook f, or just rook c1. There's no rook fc1 because no other rook can go to c1 here. Rook c1. He's probably not going to play. Actually, there's an interesting variation there. Rook c8. So rook c1, rook c8, take, bishop a7, c2. But then I can play a move like knight d4 or knight e1, attacking c2. And if he goes knight b4, I might be able to play b6, bishop b4, b7. And if he moves the rook to c8, say, in that variation, I don't know, maybe you can there actually. Maybe you can go rook c8, believe it or not. Rook e8 I meant, sorry. Because I can't take on c2 with a rook because of rook e1, mate. And if I go knight c2, he's got bishop c1. And if I queen the pawn, he takes, bishop takes, and then he plays knight takes c2 at the end, winning the piece. So yeah, you know, you don't have time to calculate any of this in the game, right? You're just playing on instinct. You know, the thing with Blitz is a lot of it's just, most of it's just instinct. Occasionally you have enough time you can calculate variations. You know, I'm not like Nakamura can probably calculate he probably calculates as many variations, if not more variations, in a Blitz game than I do in a classical game. But you know, I don't have time to, I don't, you know, I'm not that fast at calculating. So here I had to play on instinct. So I went knight d4, which I wasn't particularly happy with because I saw he could take on e3, for instance, and then take on d4, and I thought, well, I'm certainly not better there, but probably I can hold, like knight e3, f e3, bishop d4, e d4, rook c8. Let's say rook c8 is possible, rook c8, rook c1, it should be a draw, probably. Rook c4, bring the king, like king f2. Rook a4, rook c3, g6, something like that. It's probably going to be a draw objectively, or king f8. Yeah, some kind of drawn rook and pawn endgame. But he went here, which again surprised me. You know, I didn't have time to think about the position, and like in a panic, in short time, I took here, thinking his idea was to take on a4, forgetting that actually the knight is now on priest. Terrible blunder. I should, of course, go rook b4. Although I'm wondering here, maybe I might even be in a little bit of trouble because, no, probably not, because, well, you can actually take here and just simply push the pawn, for example. This is one possible variation. It starts again very, very messy, like endgame, right? If I go rook c1, he's got like rook c8, a5, knight d5. But he also has a problem with his back rank, so there could be variations like rook c1, rook a c8, a5. In fact, after a5 is there, maybe there's even rook c4 there. Rook c4, rook takes, knight takes, hitting the bishop on d4. And I can't go to b2 because of knight b2. So the bishop's in trouble. This could be like a sticky variation for white. Yeah, when you got no time, these are kind of variations you don't want to see, right? So, but all that was rendered irrelevant because I took here, he took, and I ended up losing the game. I mean, I think the next few moves was something like this. and rook c6. But he played this part of the game well enough from here to. I probably can't remember all the moves. Probably Nick can, because he's a bit of a brain man. He can probably remember all the moves from every game that he played. But I can't remember all the moves and all the games from the Blitz tournament. Probably most of the players in the tournament can't, to be fair. So we now move on to the next game that I lost, which was against Mr. Sarakauskas, who, again, player I've never lost to. As far as I'm aware, I don't think I've ever lost to him. And yeah, so this is like, up to this point, I've been a comfortable opponent for me. I played him earlier in the year in the Cleveland Rapid Play. I beat him in quite a nice game, actually. But he's quite a good player. I mean, he's quite a good Blitz and speed chess player. A few years ago, I played in the British Rapid Play. It wasn't a very strong field, but he was like the second or third seed. Richard Bates was there as well, a few other players. I had a draw early on with a low rate player. I ended up drawing with good minus. He was leading after day one, and then I was sort of caught him up. But then towards the end of the tournament, I lost to Tim Wall in a kind of a B3 system. And that was the end of my chance. So he ended up winning the tournament. So I already knew from that he was obviously quite a dangerous kind of Blitz specialist. So I should sit up properly. I just went to see the back doctor because I've been having all these back issues. But he said that, fortunately, it was good news. I didn't have any kind of serious issues with my back. So there's some good news at least. But yeah, so funny enough, a variation I haven't had much luck with, which is Bishop d7 recently. I normally, in the past, used to go Knight d7, but I've investigated this recently, and I realised that Bishop d7 is actually a pretty good move, if you know what you're doing. And when they take, I think Knight takes is just as good as Queen takes. Queen takes is like the main line, but Knight takes is equally good, in my opinion. E6. So the main line goes C3, Bishop E7. I believe it's something like this. And White generally tries to undermine the Knight. Not so much the Knight C3, because then you end up getting labelled with this weakness on C3, but Knight D2. I think this is some kind of main line, right? And then you take, and then you can either castle, or you can also play. At the moment, the black. If we look at the Black King, it's not actually under any threat whatsoever. So Black actually has time to play moves like Rook C8 or even A5. I think is sometimes is a plan here. But I'd probably just castle, and I think Black is fine. Queen can come out to B6. Rook comes to C8. Generally speaking, White will try and attack on the king side. Maybe with moves like Rook E3, D3. Maybe stuff H4 will come. But I think Black is fine. So I would have been fairly comfortable with that. But instead, he kind of surprised me. He castled, and he went Rook E1, and he went D4. So he's trying to get this Marcosi bind set up, and I've seen him play this kind of way before. Yeah, so essentially you are you're trying to limit Black's potential to do much. So you go C4 and B3, and then you sit on the position. So I went Queen C7, which I thought was a good tactical move because I'm slowing down his C4 break. So he went B3. I think this. I'm not sure about the move order. I went Knight C5. I'm not sure about the move order. I might have got the moves wrong around about here. He went Knight D2. I believe I went A6. And he went Bishop B2. I went Bishop B7. Now he really shocked me because I think he was a little bit nervous because it was obviously quite an important game. At this point, he was a point ahead of me, I think. Or maybe half. No, I think he was half a point ahead of me. So because but really, it wasn't such a bad situation to be in. You know, you're only half point. There's loads of rounds left. And I think I put too much pressure on myself to win this game. And we'll see later on that, yeah, this ends up costing me. Yeah, there were so many rounds left. It shouldn't really have been an issue. I shouldn't really have been thinking in terms of score at this point. You know, it's probably, I'm not sure when we played, it was like round 6 or 7. But yeah, this turned out to be a critical loss. So he played c4 here, which really shocked me. I was like, wow, surely I'm teeing up for knight d3. So I was, well, happy days, I'm going to go knight d3, right? And obviously you realise it's blunder. He goes rook e2, I took. I'm kind of unlucky in a way that I can't now win by force because he's blundered a piece. I mean, I think he had to move the rook. He couldn't move the bishop and lose the exchange. The exchange is just dead lost position. But this is also dead lost. But my powers of conversion were very poor here, and I think the lack of food and combined with the nervousness, and also his good play after that. He played well from this point on. Mostly, he played quite. He outplayed me. Kind of contributed to my loss. So here, this knight is under a little bit of pressure. So I'm losing the knight. I've got to take here. So I win a pawn. Right, I won a pawn. He could take one tonight, but it wouldn't change much. I'll still be clearly better. Well, actually winning here, I'm just a pawn up for nothing. A computer would say that this is winning. So I went rook c8. I expected him to go rook c1. I was just going to trade. But he played queen a4, which again surprised me. Now, this is where I kind of regret not just going knight d7. I think he was all over the shop at this point. I think I would have just won the game quite quickly if I'd gone knight d7. It's very hard to play White's position now. I'm ready to castle. Bishop f6, moves like b5, knight c5. He has to watch out for. But at the moment, b5 will run into queen a6, which is a little bit of a problem. But his queen is not well placed on a4. I mean, to be honest, queen a4 surprised me as well. But I think he was a little bit rocking at this point. I went queen d7, which is a bit of a cop-out move, not a great move, practically speaking. So I regretted that later on. And again here, I should just go bishop f6. And I probably would have won the game if I'd done that. And then just put the king on e7, where it's defending all the pawns. Makes it much easier for black in the game to kind of unravel. In the game, I ended up outplaying myself. Because I went here, which was fine. I can't really remember the game after this, to be totally honest. I think there is a video recording of like the rook and pawn endgame. I remember we got down to a rook and pawn endgame where it was equal material. Actually, I might have even been a pawn up originally, but he attacked. He kept checking my king, and I could have repeated. And given the time situation, I was getting very short time. It was getting very random. I probably should have repeated and just accepted I wasn't going to win that game and stay within half a point. But because I played on, and then he outplayed me after that, and I kind of played a very poor rook and pawn endgame where I was possibly winning. But it was kind of murky because he's got 2 connected pass pawns plus a pass d pawn. I've got 3 connected on the king side. Quite possibly, I certainly shouldn't have lost that. But because he outplayed me and I was getting short of time, and I sort of there was a big crowd around the board at this point, I kind of I collapsed under the nervous pressure. And fair play, he won that game. And obviously after the game I sort of did my usual moaning and I was completely winning, this kind of thing. But no, fair play. But that turned out to be a crucial loss because that means that he was way ahead of me on tiebreak. He was way ahead. He was 1.5 points ahead of me at that point. But also he was crucially ahead of me on tiebreak. So if we were level on points, he would go through ahead of me. It came down to me against him because he'd won that particular game. And that turned out to be a crucial factor. So we'll just look at the last game that I remembered, which was against Kansdale in the final round. This is somebody called Zachary Kansdale. Is at Durham University. I think quite a few of the players there were actually from Durham University. So Durham has got like a fantastic university. I've lived in Durham for 2 or 3 years with my family. Then we moved to Alnwick. But Durham is one of the better universities in the country, and it's I think it's got a chess club as well. And this was one of the players that represented Durham, right? Or represented himself basically. But he's like Durham University. So I played against Kansdale. I was white. So let's have a quick look at the game. So this is played in the final round. At this point, I was level on points with Keith Arkle, and I was half a point behind Zarakowskis. So obviously at that point, I'm hoping they both lose, right? Not being cruel, but or they at least drop a draw, right? As it turned out, Gediminas Arakauskis offered his opponent, David Henderson, a quick draw, right? Which obviously is, he probably, if he'd played the game, he probably would have won. No disrespect to Henderson, he probably would have won the game. He offered a quick draw. Henderson accepted. Happy days, right? He through to the final. As I'll explain later why he went through and I didn't. But in this position, he played the Cambridge Springs. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's two main moves here for white. There's probably other moves as well. The idea of the Cambridge Springs is kind of an annoying move, Queen A5. You're threatening knight E4. So if white was playing with like Bishop E2, knight E4, it's actually kind of an annoying move here. I mean, you could even get a situation where white went Bishop D3. Now, let's say I went knight E4 here. If you take here, well, you're actually in trouble now, because if you move the knight, Queen G5, Queen G5, it's going to pick up the bishop, right? And if you play a move like Rook C1, and if he takes, if you take on a C4, you're going to hang the knight. So this is why this Cambridge Springs has, attracted so many people over the years. There's lots of tricks that white has to navigate. So in this position, I played the main line, which is C takes D5. My opponent took on D5 with a knight. Queen D2, as Bishop B4. Rook C1. I believe this is all played back, for example, those famous old games, Kasparov versus Smyslov, for example. From something like 1980. This is testing my memory. It's something like 1983 or 1984. It would have been a final before he played Karpov. And Kasparov managed to win, but I remember Smyslov employed the Cambridge Springs a lot in that match. So Smyslov was in his 60s by that point. He was like 62 or 63. He was no spring chicken. He'd been playing chess for God knows how many years. He'd already been world champion back in the 1950s, and he's a very long career, and he's still playing in the 1980s. In fact, he still played through to the 1990s. He died, quite a few years ago, obviously. In fact, as far as I'm aware, the only remaining world champion from that era who's still alive is Boris Spassky. Everybody else is dead. Josian died of stomach cancer, I believe, in 1984. Tao died, very poor health he had for many years. He was like an alcoholic, essentially like a very bad lifestyle. He died fairly young, and he looked about 20 years older than he was when he died. Right? He was like for many years he looked probably at least 20 years older than he was. Botvinnik obviously died. I think he would have died probably in the 1990s or something like that. Bobby Fischer died a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, at least 10 years ago, I think. Maybe more, like in the 2000s or like early 2010s, of kidney failure, I believe, or liver failure. It was either kidney failure or liver failure. He had some problem. He had some kind of phobia about going to the doctors. So the only one still alive is Boris Spassky. Anyway, in this position, after my babbling, we got this. My opponent played move f6, which is not really recommended by theory, but you can play this sometimes in this queen's gambit variation, but probably not here. I think b6 is a better move. b6. This is recommended by theory. Now, often here I go queen d3. The idea is to discourage this bishop a6 move, because if you play normal developing move here, they go bishop a6. It's kind of an annoying move, right? Now, if you castle, the idea is to take and just castle, or something like this. Here. How do you assess this position? Black's plan is fairly straightforward, actually. I think Black's plan is just put the rook on c8, exchange on d4, and then invade on c3. And it's actually, without the light square bishop, it becomes very difficult for white to attack the black king. It's very hard to create any kind of attack on the king side. So Black's idea of using the half-open C file, or will be completely open once you exchange on d4, and white takes back the c pawn, is quite an effective one. So something like that is possible. I mean, I'm not massively all favour of theory, but I do occasionally go queen d3. But it doesn't seem to lead to any advantage. But he went f6, and now he castled. And now it's like happy days, right? Like bishop d3, right? I really wanted to win this game because I felt like, you know, if I win this game and I miss out, then, you know, so be it. Yeah, I thought you might try f5 here, and then I was planning to go check and then knight g5. And I felt very happy. I thought I might just win the exchange. But I had a feeling he might play that. But if I go h6, there's moves like knight e6 or possibly knight f7 anyway. I think like here I could go here. What I think about now is knight b6 a move. There's knight f8, there's knight c4 hitting the queen. Although I do have queen e2 or queen d3. I'm not sure. But none of that happened in the game because he took, which is probably not a bad move actually. So clearly, I felt like given the position, his king looks a bit shaky. Given that he's played this f6 move, I don't want to exchange queens, so I took that e pawn. He went knight b6, and I played a queen c2, trying to invoke this move f5, and then I'm going to grab this e5 square for the knight. Maybe it will also might just go rook e1. But f5 I think was a better move, right? Better try. Because actually the knight is ready to come into d5. Maybe c4 is a good move. Probably the computer would not assess black's position very kindly. The computer would probably say that black's position is not good. I'm going to go rook e1. Yeah, this doesn't look a very good position for black actually, to be totally honest. If you go bishop e6, I've got rook e1 hitting you with tempo. The queen looks a little bit misplaced here. It could be something like bishop e6, rook e1, rook e8. Rook e5 might be possible. So he played here. It's kind of like a blunder, right? Because, well, it is a blunder. I went check. And I think he just overlooked that. He went knight d5. Possibly c4 here was good actually as well. But I took. So I can meet knight f4 with bishop c4 check. And he can't go to h8 because f8's hanging. So he went bishop d4. I went here. And now I was like happy days. Queen f3, c4, knight f4, bishop h7, and he resigned. So quite a clean game. I mean, we could even, I mean, what does the computer actually say? The computer says, I'm going to request a computer analysis. How accurate was that game? 99% accuracy. Wow, that's probably my most accurate game ever. My opponent's not too bad, but only 80%. Probably my most accurate game ever. Played in the last round of Blitz tournament. Not bad. So it showed that I was starting to play well. Obviously, weaker opposition towards the end, you would also have to say. So you have to take that into consideration as well. But I felt that after I'd warmed up and had that food, I started to play well. So I'm going to train a bit harder for next year's Blitz and try and win that. At the moment, I would say probably Amit Gart's is slight favourite because, or even clear favourite, because he qualified with 14 out of 15. He's a very strong player. Now, Keith Arkle made a very generous post. He said, you know, I qualified, but it's a shame that Danny didn't qualify. It would have been good for him to play in the final. Maybe they could keep a slot open for him. It's very kind words, but the thing is, I feel like I knew the rules going in. I'll show you the final standings were. So this is the final standings. And my performance was not good, right? I'm rated 25-22. My Edo rating performance was only 22.56. That's not good enough when you rate 25-22. So I don't know if I lost enough points to go below. It doesn't say how many points I lost, but I must have lost rating. Even though I scored plus 10, which is crazy. So you score plus 10, but you still lose rating. But yeah, so essentially, yeah, I just didn't qualify, right? So I don't really want to like a sympathy vote, you know, put him in because he didn't qualify, but he's unlucky. That's probably the highest scoring person who didn't qualify over all the qualifiers. If we look at some of the other qualifiers, Southwest, that was okay. Yeah, you have to click on. It's quite a lot of hassle. You have to click on show tournament details, ranking list after 15. Well, you see actually the scores there are lower, right? So this, my 12.5. Obviously, I didn't play in that qualifier. Keith played in that qualifier, so he played in more than one. I only played in one qualifier. Keith scored. It's probably a slightly stronger qualifier than my qualifier, I would say. London one was obviously quite strong. Trying to click. This Chrome is very slow. I don't know if anyone's got any tips for speeding up Chrome, but it's very slow. So a ranking list after round 15. Again, I could have played in this qualifier as well. Yeah, so 12.5 would have been enough at equal first. In this, there's another one which was, I think, was Northwest, right? This is the one maybe, or Edinburgh probably should play. I think like Belfast and Bridgend are too much. Midlands was an Amigatsi one. There's a Northwest one. And ranking list. I think next year I'm going to look at more into. If you really want to play it, I feel like I'm don't totally agree with the way they do the tournament. To be honest, I think they should really seed some players through, or just have one big tournament. I mean, I don't understand why they don't just have one big open, like in London, say in December, or But I think the problem is it's space, right? It's like to do that you have to get a big kind of venue together, right? You even like need a 4-in-seal venue with like a hotel that size. So the hotel that they use, the playing hall isn't that large. So it's only really suitable for like a smaller number of players. And the other thing is, because they have so many different qualifiers, they're getting the entry fee from those qualifiers. And some people, like Peter Lalich, for example, he played in a lot of qualifiers. So he's paying the entry fee every single time, right? I mean, it must cost him a fortune to play all these different tournaments because he's travelling all around the country. Fair play, right? He was finishing up there in a lot of these tournaments, but he didn't quite qualify, unfortunately. So yeah, you could make that argument. I could make an embittered argument about how I should be playing the final anyway, because there's people in the final who, no disrespect to them, will score a lot of points less than what I would have scored. And it makes it a slightly less competitive tournament if you haven't got some GMs there. I feel like I should really be playing the final, but I had a chance to play it and I wasn't good enough. So I don't really want now a sympathy vote to go through. I don't feel like I deserved to be there. I knew the rules going in, and I wasn't good enough. So anyway, that's the story. It's disappointing from my perspective, but the upside is I don't have to spend a small fortune getting down to. You see the price of some of these hotels here, like this one here, London Heathrow is £185, right? So my next tournament is Guernsey. Travelling over there on Thursday. And the tournament starts on Sunday, I believe. So that's going to be tough. 7 rounds, 1 game a day. There's no rest days, which is true in most tournaments. If it's only 1 game a day and it's only 7 rounds, you shouldn't really need a rest day. There's a Blitz tournament on Saturday as well, I believe. So I'll probably play that as well. But yeah, anyway, so that's the story of my British Blitz. I think the other thing as well, I didn't really do much work before the tournament. Maybe the week before I slacked off. I've been a bit depressed lately. And I think that cost me. The slow start cost me. So I think in next year I'll make a much bigger effort with the Blitz. And but it's just one of those things, every other year I've qualified comfortably, 14 out of 15, 15 out of 15. I think if I played a North East qualifier for the next 5 years, I'd probably qualify 3 or 4 out of the next 5 years, right? It's just so happened that this one year I didn't qualify. It's not the end of the world. You move on. And yeah, so well done to the people. Good luck to Keith Arkle and Zarakowskis in the final. They deserve to qualify. However, I do think someone like Amit Gartz is probably quite a big favourite. You know, he's like 2,600 rated at Blitz, so it's going to be tough for everybody else, I think, to beat him. But we shall see. Blitz, anything's possible. Anyway, thanks for watching that video. I'm sorry it's such a long video. Please like and subscribe. I'm interested to see your comments below about, do you think that they should change possibly the setup for this and possibly seed some people through, or are you happy about the way they do it? Could it be a big open where there's like one tournament rather than having to spend the money to play more than one tournament just to play in the final? Interested to see your comments. Thank you again.